Hi, welcome to the second of my ad hoc videos, recordings of the Oz 30K activities. Um, People enjoyed the first one, so I thought I'd do a second one as I was going over some information for book 2 of the Librarium Terra. Um, this one revolved around a special event series that we called the Hastilude. It was focused on a night themed event. So the night pilots getting together and competing in tournaments, basically like the old medieval tournaments in Europe. So whereas this one was had modified rules and was meant to represent a kind of a truce area. No one was allowed to fight. If it was in a war zone, an area of neutral territory would be marked out, and the games were um, not meant to be sullied by any conflict or death within that territory. I wrote some lore about it, kind of uh, made it kind of an established tradition within the Australis Ultima sector. And basically, if anyone breaks the truce, all of the signatory knight houses would automatically hunt them down. So it was kind of a irrelevant of whether you're at war or not. You don't want to face the wrath of all of the signatory knight houses coming after you, type thing. Um, on the event side of things, it was really intended to be a beer and pretzels game. It was first run as a Christmas breakup event for one of our local gaming clubs. Just something fun, completely different, and just something that people could rock up to with a single model. Even if they didn't have a knight, we had surplus knights. People could just come along, play, throw some dice, and have a bit of fun. Um, so there's an entire alternative mechanic system. I kind of bastardized it from there was a box set that came out ages ago that had two knights, and it was kind of you could target certain areas. I can't remember the name of it. I'll have to look it up. But yeah, it was a very kind of simple system, but it worked really well. The mechanic was nice and smooth, and it made it a little bit more personal. It was literally you're controlling a single model, and you're fighting against another person with a single model. So that mechanic worked really well, and I wanted to try and translate it across. It certainly wasn't intended at the start to be 30k specific. I wrote it into the fluff as being 30k specific, but there's certainly no reason why a Hastilude had to be set in the Horus Heresy or the Great Crusade or the Scouring or anything like that. Could certainly work just as well in 40k in later iterations of the game. And there was also no reason why other non-imperial contestants couldn't take part. One person asked if they could actually field a Chaos Knight, and as long as they fluff-wise abided by the rules of the games, there would be no reason that they would be turned away. As long as they kind of were on a bound and faced the wrath if they broke the truce, anyone was welcome to actually compete in the Hastilude. And so that kind of opened up a few options, and people were kind of really interested in working out the history of their knights and that sort of stuff. Um, so the mechanics itself was it stretched over the entire event. So it was a 2-day event, and the idea was that you would rock up, you represent your pilot, and you were given 200 credits at the start of the event. I got a heap of metal coins made for the event, so people actually had kind of currency, and it was credits that they were using. They had a little box to store it in. And then you would use one knight at a time. You could only ever pilot one knight. You could switch different knights and change their armaments and that sort of stuff, but basically you were representing your pilot. The underlying ethos of the event was that you aren't intending to kill your opponent. You are trying to subdue your opponent, and your opponent then yields. If your opponent yields, then they pay a ransom. Basically, they're surrendering, they pay a ransom, which is equal to, we worked out a formula, their knight's cost divided by 10 or something like that. And they would pay you out of their credits the ransom, and you are then permitted back into the tournament again and compete against somebody else. If you did happen to destroy your opponent's knight, there were penalties. If, for example, you started a turn and your opponent was on full health and you killed them in a single kind of volley of attacks, then you had to pay a death ransom, which was 3 times the victim's ransom level. So that was to discourage people from taking like really, really high-powered knights with hugely destructive weapons, because they fired one shot and wiped out a knight. I was like, aha, I win. Well, actually, no, you don't. Your opponent didn't yield. You killed him, so you have to pay them. Because the idea of that was, if your knight got destroyed, you then had to pay for the repairs to bring it back online. And the repairs was your own ransom. So you pay your own ransom and you bring it back online. So the idea of this was that, yeah, if somebody came up to you and you were on full health and they just obliterated you, they would pay you 3 times your ransom level. That was to discourage people from just wiping you out. However, that ransom level dropped down as you were being wounded. So if you were on 50% or less wounds, you should really have yielded by that stage. But if you're being stubborn and are refusing to yield, and then your opponent destroys your knight, they don't have to pay you a death ransom, because you should have yielded. You were already kind of half dead. You were subdued, and you were just kind of trying to fight on, which wasn't the idea of the game. So that took a little while on both times that we ran the event to kind of, for people to get used to that concept of, okay, I've taken wounds, I'm done, I'll yield. A lot of people, especially their first few rounds, they were going, no, no, I can do this, I can do this, and then they'd be finished off. They would then have to pay their opponent a ransom, and then they'd have to pay to get their knight repaired, so they were burning through their credits quite quickly. The credits was just a bit of a fluff thing. If they ran out of credits, they could appeal to spectators for some more credits. I would be going around, people watching, and give them coins to give to other knights. If they thought they liked the painting on a knight, or they liked the performance or something, they could award someone some coins. Likewise, if someone was running out of credits, they could appeal to the gallery, make a promissory. They could take out a loan from the incumbent hosts. So there would be a night house would be hosting these games. So for the first one, it was a night house that was built into the campaign, House Horn. They were hosting the games. So any people that took out a loan would be taking out a loan against House Horn. It meant nothing in the mechanics and nothing in real world. You weren't eliminated from the tournament or anything like that. It was more for some plot hooks for writing fluff later on. So you might have survived the entire event and scored, or even won a couple of events, mini events and that sort of stuff, but you may end up being indebted to House Horn or some other organisations that you took loans out from. And people ran with that really well. It was fun watching people kind of work out who they owed money to, and what the ramifications of that was. That was quite fun. So the event itself is made up of 3 core events, and then I made a special event based on the host. So each host could have a special event. So the 3 main events was the Joust, the iconic Joust. How could you not have a night event without the Joust? So it was 2 knights charging each other down a pathway separated by a barrier. So you needed some sort of ranged close combat weapon. All of our close combat weapons were given a range, sorry. So obviously lancers had the best range. You weren't allowed to take any ranged weapons, as in firearms, into the joust. Um, so if you were a knight that only had fists, you actually couldn't hit your opponent. It was too far away. So you had to take swords or lances or whatever other kind of long close combat weapons there were. And basically, you would do 3 passes, and so the mechanics of the games, rather than everyone having all of these movements, you would have tokens and you would have a certain number of activation points. So you might have a move, a run, a charge, a snapshot, an aim shot. I can't remember all of them offhand, but each one of them was worth a certain number of action points. And so you would choose what actions you would take in that particular round, use a token, put them face down, and then at the start of the turn, you would go through certain actions. So snapshot would be first, and then a move, charge, that sort of stuff in sequence, but simultaneously. So people who chose a particular action, when that action came up, you would reveal your token, and people would simultaneously activate their knights. So the problem with the joust was that you would have to try and anticipate how far you would move, because you'd still get some randomized movement with the dice, and you would try and get close enough to attack them with the lance. And if you did a glancing hit, it would be a certain number of points. If you did a penetrating hit, it'd be more points. If it hit the shield and all of that sort of stuff, you had different requirements. So that would give you different points, and we would keep track of everybody's points versus everybody else, and that would be kind of tallied up and on a scoreboard and that sort of stuff. So throughout the day, you would rotate, or you would just move between different stations of different events and challenge people. So it was a very free reign style event. There wasn't, okay, player A is playing player B at 9:05, off you go. It was a kind of grab a drink, have a wander around, have a chat to somebody, and say, hey, that night is really awesome. Do you want to fight me in the joust? And then when you finish that, you'd go on to the Chuppanair or the duel. And that is two knights on a small battlefield. It's geared towards melee combat, but you're allowed to have ranged weapons as well. But it was a very small arena, and that's supposed to represent a one-on-one duel. And so people would fight in that one. And then the third kind of set event was called the Behord or the Grand Melee. And we would run kind of 4, 5, 6 of those over the course of the day. So one every couple of hours or so. It would cost like 30 credits or 50 credits, I can't remember the cost, to participate in the melee. Each player or each participant would bring in a knight. They could arm it how they like. But every participant would take the field at the same time. It was on a great big table, and it was an all-in brawl and effectively last night standing. So you still had yields and ransoms and that sort of stuff, but whoever was the last night standing would win the kitty of whatever was put in. It was possible for the last night standing to actually make less money than another night that was kind of making a lot of people yield and gathering a lot of ransoms. So they could actually kind of hide behind a rock and not engage anyone and technically win. But the idea of the Grand Malay was to run around and gather heaps and heaps of ransoms and try and make yourself rich and famous and that sort of stuff. So they were the 3 core events, and then there was the Quintain at my first event, which was a predetermined field with multiple targets. They were all with hidden values, so it was the same setup. It's like a shooting gallery basically, and participants would enter as many times as they would want. It would cost them 10 credits each time, and it would be like a GM'd, a game mastered event. So there would be one person kind of managing it and letting them know what their score was. As they went in, they would look at all of the enemies and they would shoot. They would use their firearms. They would use charging, close combat, whatever they felt appropriate, and they would try and score the highest they could in a set number of turns. The person managing the event would then write down their score and give it to them on a card and say, keep that secret. At the end of the event, the highest score at the end of the tournament wins the prize pool. And so people started bluffing and kind of hinting that they had this score or that score. They were more than allowed to kind of blatantly lie if they wanted, um, and encourage people to go back and participate more to try and get a better score and try and figure out the secret of the quintain, how to get the best score and all of that sort of stuff. That was a really enjoyable event. People kept on going back to that one quite a lot. Um, and then on the second event, we had a similar one. So the quintain was run by House Horn, and then the second event, which was run by Biggie's event, Biggie's house. I can't remember the name of it at the moment. Was the Hunt. So his house was based on a very kind of Albion, Britannia style world. So it was very Scottish. Uh, Themed stuff, so Old England and that sort of aesthetics. So we decided to make that event the Hunt. So it's similar to the Quintain. The event was specific to that one house holding it, and it was GM'd, where there was a great beast, um, and the participants had to hunt the beast. So the beast had predetermined reactions to certain events, like being shot at, or how close the knights were, or noises. And depending on then how knights killed the beast, that would impact the damage to the beast's pelt. So if they shot at it from afar, it might turn around and wander off the other way. If it was too close, it might charge them. If they hit it with flame weapons, it would burn the pelt and damage the pelt. All things like that. Once killed, the participants would then receive a trophy card with the value, like the quintain, and the highest score at the end of the tournament would win the prize pool. So again, it would be a secret thing. People would try and kind of work out the best way to kill the beast, try and work out the patterns of the beast, and see what score they could get. And that was a good fun one as well. Um, so accompanying all of these events, which I should have mentioned earlier because you've been seeing them, is a series of art pieces which Mary did and did for us. They're phenomenal pieces of art that are based on the Minis Codex, which is a medieval manuscript of illuminations and text and graphics like this. So each of these images is actually based off an authentic Minis Codex drawing, but obviously 40Kified with the knights in it. So you've been seeing the relevant uh, image and artwork of the events as we've been cycling through. And then there was an overall piece of artwork, and that represented the overall winner based on votes painting and the accrued gold or credits. And so what we did with this art was I actually then got them printed out on large canvases, and they were the prizes for the events. So the winner of the joust would win the canvas with the joust on it. The winner of the quintain would get the quintain's artwork. So it was a very unique prize, and going away with something kind of that unique got people really, really chuffed. It was a good surprise, and I certainly liked kind of getting the artwork generated and seeing them on canvas. And it just felt, while a lot of my other events don't have prizes, this was something different. It was, you still had winners, but you had winners in a different spirit. You weren't kind of fighting in Swiss rounds, tournaments, and that sort of stuff. It was meant to be kind of the old style honor and chivalry, and so yeah, I felt that the prizes for this one was appropriate for my usual no prize, no podium finish event styles. So it proved to be a really kind of fun event. It was very niche. So like the first time I ran it, there was only a half dozen of us over a couple of days. There was a lot of interest. People came along and kind of sat and watched it for a few hours. The second time I ran it, I think we had a few more. So it was never a huge one, like 30 or 40 people. I honestly don't think it would work with many more than like a dozen. I think it's really suited for a small crowd because it would start getting hard to um, kind of self-control the event. The players are meant to just go up and challenge each other and all of that sort of stuff. So it would be very hard to manage once you get to a higher level of players. So it was very enjoyable. It was a relaxing event. We ran it a couple of years later for the same purpose as a Christmas breakup for the local crowd. I believe that another couple of groups have run a Hastilude elsewhere in the world using my rules and that sort of stuff. And people are more than welcome to. I've got the rules, and I'll be kind of perfecting the rules in a not perfecting them, but putting them into a nice laid out document. And people who are happy to use those rules and follow the spirit of the event can also access the artwork that I had made for it, and that use them as prizes for the same purpose that I did as well. So that's kind of part of the conditions of it. So it was never a huge thing like Act of Heresy. Uh, I wanted to try and run a few more, but unfortunately, events got in the way. COVID most recently. Previous ones was literally a gaming store shutting down, cancelled the event so that we couldn't run it, and it's just an unfortunate series of things where I would have liked to have made it an annual series, kind of something that people can build their nights towards and that. And it seems to be kind of that middle ground of it's a fun side event, but not serious enough for people to really kind of dedicate and lock themselves into. But those people who do turn up really thoroughly enjoyed themselves. So, yeah, it's been hard to get off the ground. But if you've got a small player group, it's certainly something fun, something unique, and just different to play than kind of 3,500 points or Zone Mortalis or whatever. You've just got a single night. Um, and that was your personification type thing. There was one more element to it, which I've forgotten. I'm coming back to now, which was it's called the Part Arms or the Passage of Arms. So there was a tradition in medieval Europe where knights and tournament orders would attend tournaments, and outside of the main tournament, they would hold their own mini challenge. Sometimes these would happen on the way to tournaments, so they might um, camp at a crossroads and they would challenge every knight that would come to the crossroads to a fight to the first 10 blows or something like that. So they're called Passage of Arms. So within the Hastilude event, this was encouraging players to make their own mini challenge event. So representing them turning up to the tournament and going, okay, I'm setting camp at the bridge. Everybody who wants to come across the bridge has to challenge me. So they could make their own mini challenges. There were a number of players who turned up to both events who were quite historically minded. They played in the SCA, Medieval Recreationist Group, so they knew what a Passage of Arms was, and they went into a lot of effort and kind of came up with some really cool mini games and that sort of stuff. They used a hound and fox, so they used I can't remember what the mini knights were called, but yeah, they used those guys as squires, and you'd kind of have three squires versus one full knight, and those sort of challenges. So they were fun, and there was an artwork for that particular one as well. So in the lore wise, the reason why I'm going over that is the Hastelud played a very instrumental part in book two, which was very early on in the Act of Heresy series. So Act of Heresy 2 took place on a world where a Hastilude was taking place. And at the end of the Hastilude, there was an orbital bombardment that broke the truce. And that was the actual trigger of the main campaign, or the main event of Act of Heresy 2, and triggering an extension and an expansion of the Heresy War that was happening in Centromar onto Centromar's Gate, which was a system there. So that was kind of a prelude to a bigger event, and also gave like a lead-in story. There was going to be another Hastilude in the Australis Ultimate Sector chain of events in Varn, or Varn's Gate. Unfortunately, COVID has really kind of hammered home, and that event had to be cancelled, postponed, so that the Hastilude never ran there. But there will certainly be kind of mentions of other Hastiludes in the lore of the Librarium Terra books. But it was, in real life, they were minor events, as I said, only kind of half a dozen to a dozen players. But in the lore of Oz 30K, they were quite important, and kind of part of the spreading of the heresy and the different wars. So the war at Centromar Gate and the breaking of the truce, we really tried to make that a big offence, which kind of forced people to be hunted down by the Knight Orders and that sort of stuff. Because, as I said, that if you break the truce, you get hunted. We were trying to set the scene of how evil that was, type thing. And yeah, it was good. So that's really about it. I just kind of I was putting the artwork together in my mind, just trying to review the actual rules, and started putting them into a document which I'll upload hopefully later this month for anybody interested in using it. And as I said last time, I found it quite useful to talk through the different aspects of something. It helps get it clearer in my mind, and people seem to enjoy it. So we'll see how you go. Thank you very much, and yeah, enjoy.